The first doctor in the Brooks area was Charles E. Anderson. He set up his home as an official hospital, however, it really didn't resemble one. It only had 10 beds with a water pump in the yard. In 1913, many homesteaders in the area came down with a bad fever. It turns out construction workers at a nearby camp drank some polluted water and contracted a terrible illness known as typhoid. Train after train dropped off the sick men so they could get immediate medical attention. Dr. Anderson struggled with the sudden influx of patients. To make matters worse, the only other doctor ran off with the nurse. Luckily, he received help from Mrs. Nora Berry, a nurse from Bazzano. Nora in her uniform was a familiar figure for Bazzano and Brooks, always being on call for Dr. Anderson and Dr. A.G. Scott of Bazzano. She was known for her good sense of humor, consideration of others, and the interest she took in her community. When a doctor was needed on the farm, someone would have to ride by horseback to fetch him, and the doctor would arrive on horse and buggy. Thankfully, Dr. Anderson invested in a Model T Ford when cars first started arriving on the prairie. This did wonders for cutting down on travel time between patients. After a while, the locals petitioned for a proper hospital to be built, one more fitting for the community. In 1942, 81% of the town voted in favor for the project. A year and roughly $55,000 later, the construction of the Brooks Municipal Hospital was finished. The 22-bed unit was far more accommodating for the number of people in the area at the time. Although new wings were added in 1947 and 1952, Brooks outgrew the hospital fairly quickly, and wards were sometimes overcrowded to the point that beds were placed in corridors. In 1958, an ambulance service was started by the Brooks Volunteer Fire Department. They served this role nicely, as the members already had their first aid training and their license allowed them to drive an ambulance. Dorothy Orr is a name many familiar with the hospital would recognize. She moved to Brooks in 1959 to work as an operating room nurse. In 5 short years, she worked her way up to the title of head nurse at the Brooks Municipal Hospital in the operating room and emergency department. She may have been a nurse, but to many, she was a teacher. She taught theory and perfection, and everyone was expected to know their duties. There was a lot of pride she took with her efficiency in the operating room. The new hospital, named the Brooks Health Center, was built in 1979 at a cost of $9.6 million, and its size triumphed over the one built decades earlier. Although it was crowded and outdated, many pioneers remember the familiarity and warmth that the old hospital provided the community during its early history.